again and welcome. This is Indie Reads TV. I am Diana Catherine Plopa from Pages Promotions, and we're here in the studio today with Clay Boura. Oh, that's not Clay. There you go. I'm still getting used to the technology here. So Clay is a local Michigan independent author. He writes children's books, which have a really special piece to them, which we'll talk about in a minute. So welcome, and thanks for being here, Clay.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Sure. So I mentioned that you write these special children's books. You write idioms.
Correct.
So for people who aren't up on the lingo, can you first of all just basically explain what an idiom is?
Sure. So idioms are like figures of speech. So, and we all use them all the time without even thinking about it. You know, you say it's raining cats and dogs, or hold your horses, things like that. Mm-hmm. Those are idioms. And I've just always been very fascinated by the language and by the English language we have. And especially was reminded of that when I started having my own kids, and I would hear my wife and I using these things all the time. And kids at young ages are so literal and don't understand these things. So they would quite often, we'd say, okay, well, hold your horses. And then, my son would look at me like, my horses? What are you talking about?
I don't have horses.
Right.
Well, you are not that generous a parent.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of where the whole idea came from.
Okay. So tell us about this book, Don't Let the Cat Out of the Bag.
Sure.
Give us just the general overview of the story, and then we'll open the pages and look inside a little bit.
Sure. So each one of my stories, I'll have sort of a process that they all go through. They're all kind of the same thing, just based on different idioms. So at the beginning of each story, Beamer hears one of these idioms, doesn't know what it means, and kind of starts wondering, and he daydreams, and he creates this whole idea in his head to explain why he thinks we would say these silly things. And by the end of each story, he learns the real meaning behind it. So in Don't Let the Cat Out of the Bag, Beamer and his mother have just come home from buying his dad a birthday present, and Beamer's ready to tell his dad all about it, and his mother tells him, no, Beamer, don't let the cat out of the bag. And Beamer kind of thinks, well, we didn't buy him a cat. We bought him a razor. What does this mean? So he dreams up this whole story about this kingdom of mice, and there's this evil cat named Meowser.
Meowser?
Meowser, yep. And Meowser was always trying to think of ways to take over the kingdom, and so one day Meowser sets a trap, and he lures the king in and puts him down in the dungeon, and then there's this a mouse by the name of Monterey Jack who decides he's going to come and rescue the king and get rid of the evil Meowser. And so Monterey Jack gets a bunch of other mouse knights together, and they sew together this giant bag, and then they sneak in the castle one night, and they capture Meowser with the bag, and then they throw Meowser down in the dungeon and rescue the king, and from that day forward, they make sure to never let the cat out of the bag. Right.
So show us what you think is your... I'm always curious when I talk to children's authors. As with any book, there's a process.
Right.
And you find yourself gravitating to one character or one scene. And you're also the illustrator for this book. So we get to take that to another level. So can you show us what your favorite page spread is in the book?
Ooh, favorite page spread. That's a good question.
So this book, what's the favorite part of the story?
Man, I have so many of them. I think maybe one of them, because, and I'll let you in on a little secret, something I do with all my books, is I put a little secrets in, and I give little clues as to what my next book is going to be.
Okay, so little Easter eggs.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of things sprinkled in. Like in every one of my books, I have my family and I in some shape or form in the story, which I can show you. And in each story, there's a little Easter egg to tell you what the next one's going to be. So in this book, and this page here is where we first are introduced to the evil cat Meowser. You see Meowser's in his little cave here, and he's got blueprints for the castle on the wall.
And I see the little mice guys down here.
Right, yeah, so he's got some little cat toys in the corner. And if you look close enough, one of those little toys is a little elephant.
Yes, it is.
Which leads into the second story, which I wrote, which is the elephant in the room.
Okay.
So it's one of the fun things that I like to do in each one of my stories.
So out of this book, I know you have 2 daughters and a son, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Out of this book, which one is your son's favorite page, do you think?
Ooh, I could probably tell you in the second book, because all 3 of my kids are in my second book.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Oh, you got to show the mouse. Show us
here.
the mouse. That's
So this here is Monterey Jack, the hero who comes
Monterey
in
Jack.
and saves the day. So I always love plays on words and
That's
goofy
wonderful.
things like that. So.
And I'm a cheese fanatic, so that's perfect.
I would
These
say he
are
probably
great,
likes
and you've
that,
done
so.
all this artwork as well.
Correct. Yep.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
Beamer's a character I created when I was 12 years old. I've been drawing ever since, so it's just a passion of mine, something I love to do.
So show us a picture of Beamer.
Sure. Yep. So here's
Okay.
Beamer here.
So there's Beamer right here.
Yep.
In here.
And right there.
So how has Beamer changed over the course of the years that he's been with you?
He actually, I was looking for my original picture I wanted to bring with me to show to you. I still have that at home. I created him back when I was 12 years old, and it was back in 1991. I still have a piece of paper dated and everything. But when I do school visits, a lot of times I show the kids that very picture so they can see how he's changed. And it's kind of surprising. Like, my drawing style has kind of stayed the same, and he's maybe gotten a little more refined over the years, but for the most part, he's pretty much stayed the same.
Okay.
I think he's got a few less hairs on top. I think when I first drew him, he had a lot more spiky hair, but aside from that, he's pretty much stayed the same. So.
I know that when you do reading events, you teach the kids how to draw Beamer. I've seen you do that, and it's
Correct.
super fun.
Yeah.
I was curious about how he's morphed over the years, but
Yeah.
it stayed pretty much the same. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Although I will tell you, my original dream was to be a cartoonist.
Okay.
And so when I created Beamer, obviously I was just getting into adolescence. I was almost a teenager. And so at that time, Beamer was a teenager. So all the cartoon strips that I created, Beamer was, a teenager getting into trouble with school, with his parents, with girls, whatever. When I decided to become a children's author and came up with the idea for the books, I decided to kind of make him younger. So that's one way that he's kind of changed, I guess.
Okay.
So
Show us the next one. Let's see if I can. I'm having some technical challenges today. Let's see here. It's one of the challenges of doing a show like this, being a host and doing all the technical stuff.
all at one time?
Yeah, it's sometimes. There we go. Cat out of the bag. Here's the next
There
one.
we go.
I'll get there eventually. Sorry. The elephant in the room. Give us the overview synopsis of this great book.
Sure. So in this one, once again, Beamer is sitting around and he hears someone use an idiom. In this case, he and his parents are sitting down to dinner, and his mother's talking about how his uncle is a bad cook, and his father says, "Yeah, that's the elephant in the room." Nobody talks about that. And Beamer kind of looks around like, "Elephant in the room? We don't have an elephant in the house. What are you talking about?" So then he dreams up this wild story about this village where it's a whole village of hippopotamuses. And the village is kind of run at the moment by this evil gang of rhinos known as the pachyderm punks. And these rhinos are just running amok and causing trouble and making it terrible for everybody. And so one day the mayor's had enough, and he decides to call for help. And he calls from a whole bunch of different superheroes, but none of them are available. And the only ones he could get a hold of are the elephant ninjas. So elephant ninjas come to town. They start hiding in the different rooms and everything. And eventually they capture the rhinos, put them in jail. And then because the mayor's so happy, he decides to make sure there's always an elephant in the room to protect them.
That's awesome. One of the things that I love best about these books is you get to see inside Beamer's head. Can you show us an illustration there where we're making that transition to
Sure,
Beamer in real
absolutely.
life and into his imaginary world?
So that's kind of one of the ways that these are actually two illustrations that are the exact same in every single one of my books. Is this one here where he first transitions into his daydream, and then at the end of the story where he kind of snaps out of it and he comes
great.
to and then realizes, things are going on in the real world.
So you have two daughters,
Correct. Yep.
and what are their ages?
So my daughter Chloe is 9, and then my daughter Autumn is 6.
Okay, so what's Autumn's favorite picture in that book?
And this one, I can show you. So in this book, I have, I think, 16 or 17 nieces and nephews.
Wow.
I have 3 kids of my own, and throughout my books, I'm creating lots of different characters. And coming up with the names, I decided I was going to use names from a lot of my family members. It'd be kind of cool and special for them when they get to read the books.
Sure.
So, but first and
And
foremost,
great when you have grandchildren.
Right, exactly. And so first and foremost, I had to put my kids in. So, as I mentioned, as you can see here, the mayor is calling. He's on the phone. He's calling for help from the local superheroes. The first one he calls is Cameron the Chameleon, which is an nod
Your
to my
son.
son named Cameron. Yep. You kind of see the chameleon hiding in the image there.
Sort of, yeah, you can, a little bit. He's
That's one
hiding.
thing when Shirley's at the school, the kids are always, oh, I see him. No, I can't see. I see him. It's always fun to kind of listen to them.
And then your daughters?
And my daughters are in this one here. So on this page, we have Chloe the clownfish, who is saving Autumn the angelfish from the evil green fish net.
Ooh,
So-
yeah.
Yep, so this one here would be Autumn the angelfish, and this here is Chloe the clownfish.
That's awesome.
So-
Did you put your wife in any of the stories?
She is in my newest book, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so we'll get to that one.
Yep.
Awesome.
And then also in this
so
one
much
are
fun.
two of my nephews as well. I have Crazy Claw Caden and Roaring Rowan, who are the bears who are hunting for honey here. Or rather, being hunted by the honey, I suppose.
So give me an idea. The artwork here is really pretty extensive. There's a lot going into the art that you put together for these books. So you have to write the story. There we go. Technology. Not super technology, but technology nonetheless. Okay, so you have to put together the story. You have to do all the artwork. How long does it take you to put together a book? I mean, these books have, what, like 35 or 40 pages in
I
them?
think they're like 36 pages each. Yep,
Okay.
right around there. Yep.
So
So-
how long does it take for you to put together a total book
So,
where it's ready to go to press?
right. So that's actually a good question that I get asked a lot when I do school visits, and the kids are always curious about that, especially the older kids when I go see them. And because this isn't my full-time day job, because I have 3 kids at home and a full-time job and things like that,
Right.
obviously it takes away time. But for each one of my books, I think it has taken me approximately 1 whole year from beginning to end. Typically, I get the stories done and written in a pretty short time frame, and then the majority of the time is just doing the illustrations, going back, adding details, refining them, and things like that. So.
Okay. So what would you say is your favorite part of the creation process?
Oh, I think that just everything about it. I love coming up with the ideas. I've always had a real wild imagination. I love putting little funny, humorous bits into it. I love plays on words. I love creating the stories and coming up with as many cool, cute, little funny things I can put into them. And then the drawing, has always been a passion of mine. On a lazy Saturday, if I can just go grab my tablet and sit down and draw, it's one of the things I love to do. So drawing all the characters and coming up with them is another favorite thing as well.
Excellent. Okay, so here's the last book, if I can get it up here on the screen. Nope, that's not it. Here we go.
There you go.
There's the proof in the pudding. So tell us a little bit about this one.
Sure. So this one, once again, Beamer is sitting in school, and this actually, when I first created Beamer, I gave him a friend. He had a friend named Bert, so it's always been Beamer and Bert were the two buddies.
Okay.
And this is the first book that actually included Bert in the story. So at the beginning of the story, Beamer and Bert are at school, and they're talking about what the best kind of ice cream is. And Bert says one flavor, Beamer says another, and so they go and they ask their teacher, who, as we mentioned before, is my wife. Mm-hmm. So it's her first appearance in one of the stories.
Okay.
And she tells them, well, the proof is in the pudding. And so they kind of, proof in the pudding? We're asking you about ice cream. What are you talking about? So then he dreams up this whole story about this town where the people are all in love with pudding. And the town is surrounded the town is all around this place called Patty's Pudding Palace. And so everybody loves Patty's pudding. Patty sells pudding to everybody. They have a pudding park and a pudding pond, and this whole town is all about the pudding. And one day, these 2 brothers come to town, Jimmy and Johnny Jackal, and they decide they're going to open up their own little Jell-O factory, and they're going to sell Jell-O to everybody. Well, everybody loves pudding here. Nobody wants any Jell-O.
Right.
So nobody buys any of their Jell-O. And so then the 2 brothers kind of realize, well, we're in some trouble here. If we don't start selling some Jell-O, we're going to go out of business. So then all of a sudden one day, all the pudding starts tasting kind of weird, and nobody knows why. So the town mayor, Sweet Sophia, let me get over to here. The town mayor, Sweet Sophia, which is actually my niece, Sophia,
Okay.
she hires the town's investigators, Lieutenant Lucas and Inspector Isaac, who are her brothers, my nephews. And so they start going around town asking people questions and investigating. And after a little bit of work, they eventually discover that Jimmy and Johnny were putting spinach into all the pudding, and so that's why it was tasting so bad. So they tried to plead their case, but Sweet Sophia wasn't having it because the proof was in the pudding.
That's wonderful. Out of this book, what's your favorite page spread?
I'll say probably this one, because that's where, actually maybe the one right before. Oh, no, yeah, I guess it was that one there. This is where we meet Miss Sherry for the first time.
And that's
my
your
lovely
wife.
Sherry.
Yeah. What did she think about being added to your book?
She actually, through the first part of the story, it's kind of funny because I didn't actually have a name for the teacher yet. But Patty, who had the pudding factory, that's actually my Aunt Patty.
Okay.
And then Jimmy and Johnny, the two jackals, are her sons. So she, as she was reading the story, she kind of got mad, like, you put your aunt and your cousin in the story before I got put in the story? So that's kind of what prompted me to name the teacher after her.
That's awesome. You know what? I was having a problem with my screen. Can you show us that picture one more time?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So a picture of Miss Sherry.
There it is. Yep. So, so Beamer's been with you since you were a child.
Yes.
What was the initial inspiration for him as a character? From an artistic point of view, not from a literary point of view, but artistically, where did you get the idea for the shape of his head and his eyes and his? Because he's got a pretty
unique face and shape. Yeah.
You know, when you look at this, there we go. When you look at him, he's different.
Right.
I mean, he's fun different, not awkward different.
Right.
So where did you come up with not making him look like an average, everyday human?
That's one thing, my drawing style, I think. One thing that I always loved, and one reason why I always kind of gravitated to cartoons is because you could make them look like anything. And all the cartoon characters I used to draw always had like big, crazy eyes or sideways eyes, big noses, small noses. So I always like to kind of stretch the limits and just make it my own and not just a normal everyday human that you would see, on the street.
So what's next for you?
So, well, as you can imagine, we have all kinds of idioms in our language. I mean, every day I come across a new one, and whether I'm at work or out shopping, and someone will mention something, and oh yeah, that could be a good idea for a story. And then the wheels start turning.
I've seen you post a lot of them on your Facebook page. Every week you post a new idiom to give us an idea of what might be coming next. But is there a favorite that you've got that's going to be in the next book?
So, as I mentioned before, I have those Easter eggs in the book, so I'll give away one of the secrets here. So in this story, and the proof is in the pudding, there's a page here where we're seeing all the people playing at Pudding Park and swimming in the pudding pond.
I love this turtle, by the way. He's just awesome.
Hanging out in the pudding there. And if you look in the back here, there's two little mice who are playing with a little ball. Mm-hmm. And so that's a little clue to my next story, which is get the ball rolling.
Excellent.
So I got a neat little story for that one.
Great.
And all these, I mean, I've kind of given away some of the Easter eggs here, but if you go to my website, I actually have, throughout the whole website, there's little Easter eggs hidden on all the different pages. If you click on those, they actually take you to a hidden page, so that page is actually an Easter egg.
Oh,
and then I explain
fun.
all the different Easter eggs that are in my book.
So your website is a treasure hunt.
Correct.
That's awesome. Okay, I need to go play with your website now. I didn't realize that about your website. Now I need to go play.
And I'm currently in the process of developing like a little game for kids to play, maybe like an idiom-inspired game to teach them about idioms. I've had some ideas to do some idiom videos where I show like some literal versions of like acting out what someone might literally think an idiom meant, and then like kind of teaching about it. So I got all kinds of ideas, just finding the time to do them all.
So when you did your launch event at the bookshop I managed for a long time, and we had you come in and have a launch event. We had a great time.
Yeah, that was excellent.
So many kids in the room, and we served pudding, and it was super fun.
Right.
I heard a couple of the adults saying, I wonder if he's going to do an adult idiom book. This could be interesting. Where could that take us? Has that occurred to you? Have you thought about doing that?
I have, and my wife has definitely thought about doing that. She actually has, anytime, I don't want to use any bad language, but anytime any like kind of more adult-oriented idioms come up, she always kind of writes down, "Ooh, this could be an idea for my book." So we'll have me on one side as a children's author. We'll have her doing the adult stuff.
If you were to do an adult book, do you think it would be illustrated, or would it just be satiristic and humorous
probably
text?
more. Yeah, maybe something more like that. Yeah.
And can you imagine doing art for an adult audience, or do you just really prefer doing art for the children's side?
I think I probably prefer it for the children's side. So, yeah.
Okay. Do you have are there any events coming up this autumn where people might be able to come and find you and meet you?
Sure, yep. And both on my Facebook page and on my website, I have a page that says events, and it lists everywhere I'm going to be. Doing a number of shows in Frankenmuth, so I'll be there. I'm doing a show coming up pretty soon, the beginning of August in Lexington, Michigan, so I'll be there. I'm doing another one over in Anchor Bay.
Oh,
so,
awesome.
So just kind of all over, anywhere I can find. Towards the end of the year, I do a lot of shows, like Christmas shows in Clawson and Troy and stuff like that. So.
Okay, so, and people can go to your website and you have an events page where they can find out where they can come and meet you and bring the kids. And,
exactly, yep.
When you do these events, do you always give them an opportunity to learn how to draw, or is that just based on if there's room at the event or time? How is that? I mean, do you give out like I know you produced a coloring book as well.
Correct.
Where people can, when they see you in person, they can also buy the coloring book. But when you teach them how to draw Beamer and his friends, is that something you do every time, or is it just something that you're able to do given time and space parameters?
So typically I've only done that, up until recently, I've only done that when I do a school visit. I go into the schools, I share the idiom stories, I teach them about idioms, and then I always end it by teaching them how to draw a Beamer.
Okay.
But 2 weekends ago I was in a show in Muskegon and kind of tried it out for the first time, where we kind of set up the tent in a different manner so people could come in. And I had the books on sale and the T-shirts and the coloring books and everything. And then I also had a table and a dry erase board. And as kids would come up, I would just ask them, "Hey, would you guys like to learn how to draw my character?" And they would spend 5 or 10 minutes with me. I would teach them how to draw, and they'd have something to take with them. So
that's awesome.
I think that might be something I might start doing more and more with my shows, just because it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's a great way to get kids interested not only in literature but in art as well.
Right.
You've done a marvelous job at combining both artistic pursuits in one place where the kids can get to it. You know, it's easily accessible for kids. That was the thing that I noticed when we had you at the launch event, was there were kids 3-4 years old and older, and the little kids were as engaged as the older kids were. I saw some adults learning how to draw Beamer, so that was super fun. So I applaud you in being able to be all inclusive.
Oh, thank you.
In your work, I think it's really wonderful.
And a lot of times when I'm at schools too, it's like, it's like, okay, we're gonna get out, we're gonna draw a Beamer, and I always hear a lot of kids, like, "Oh, I don't know how to draw. I can't draw very good. I can barely draw stick figures." But that's one of the things about Beamer is, like, when it boils down to it, is really just a handful of basic shapes. So that's one thing I always tell them. It's like, it doesn't matter how good of an artist you are, I will teach you how to draw a Beamer.
Yeah, the most fascinating thing that I noticed when you were teaching the kids to draw is it starts with very basic shapes, and then you teach them how to connect the shapes.
Right.
By the time you're done, every single child, no matter their age or level of expertise, had a Beamer drawing.
Right. Yep.
It was phenomenal to watch that whole thing unfold. For me, I'm not a particularly artistic person, so I tell people computers give me the illusion that I'm artistic, but I'm not really. But to be able to watch a room full of children and their parents all draw the same thing at the end, that was pretty fascinating to see that.
Yeah, and I've had, since doing school visits, that's really become one of my big passions. One of the things I want to do is start doing more and more is the school visits and getting out with kids. I've had people come up to me afterwards, if I'm out in the street or in the community, and, "Thank you so much for coming to my kid's school. Ever since then, my daughter has come home and she started drawing pictures and creating her own characters and writing stories," and that just kind of warms your heart. And,
absolutely.
Makes you feel like it's all worth it,
And it is, 100%. Right. So we talked about it takes about a year for you to take a full book from idea to completion and send it to press.
Correct.
How often do you actually get to spend working on your stories and your art, and you've got a family, you've got a job, you've got. So is this something you do in the middle of the night when everybody's asleep, or
pretty much.
do you have a prescribed, okay, family, this is my writing and art time, you got to leave me alone so I can get this done? How do you manage that that artistic stuff with the work-life balance kind of thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I always kind of think that family comes first, so it's always, whatever the kids need done, whether it's soccer games or ballet or swim or whatever. So time with the family comes first, but then every night, by the time everyone's in bed, I'm thinking probably somewhere around 9, 10 o'clock is usually when I get my time. And so that's typically when I work on my books is, 10 o'clock on until the wee hours of the night. So it's kind of nights and weekends whenever I can find a little bit of spare time here and there. Sometimes when I'm at shows, I'll have my tablet with me and I'll be drawing and illustrating, and so just whenever I can find the time.
So when you're at a show and you're working on your art, do you get people coming up and saying, hey, can I watch you do that? How do you do that?
I have had a couple of times, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was pretty neat. I've had a couple of kids that came by and saw it and kind of got inspired, and I have actually a collection of drawings at home from kids that have like, oh, can I show you my character? And so they'll sit and they'll draw, a little character of their own, and then I'll have them sign it for me. And
that's pretty cool.
So I have a little collection at home of drawings other people have given to me. So
that's a book.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's pretty awesome.
Yep.
So do you ever imagine doing an adult book? Do you ever imagine doing a novel or a young adult novelette?
I do have some ideas. There's a story that I came up with, I want to say in elementary school, that I remember my mother always telling me, like, you need to write this down. You should write a book about this. And it was a story about a young boy who there were some troubles in his life, and he found this little bag, and it was like a magic bag that he could imagine anywhere he wanted to be, and he could like travel through space and time through this bag, and he would get into different adventures through, traveling through this bag. So that was kind of maybe another idea I had for a story. I've also thought about maybe taking the same kind of idea I have with the Leave It to Beamer stories and maybe making them into like chapter books, perhaps for a little bit older kids as well. So.
Oh, that would be cool. Adding more layers and detail, development, characters, and doing them for an older audience.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
Wow, very neat. Have you ever imagined that perhaps one of your books might become a television series?
That
or
would be a
the
dream.
Concept becoming, would you be open to the concept becoming a television series?
I would absolutely love that. Yeah, one of my passions really, as I've said, is drawing, illustrating, but also like animating. In college I took some animation classes and just had a ball, a blast with those. And I've had some people tell me, this would make a really good PBS cartoon, or I could see each idiom just being a separate, 15, 20-minute little show.
Absolutely, I could too. Yeah, and you can see these characters really come to life.
Right, yep.
Wow, great. Well, we are about out of time. Thank you so much for coming in, Clay.
Well,
this was super fun. We will have you back again when the next book comes out.
Okay.
And we will certainly do some things in the big studio with children later in the year.
Okay.
Thanks again for coming. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
Have a nice night.
Thanks, you too.